On the morning of February 13th, 2003, Anil Chohan told his staff he had a meeting near Stonehenge. He smiled, said he'd be back in a few hours. At 11:32 a.m., his mobile phone pinged in Hounslow. By 1:05 p.m., it pinged again, closer to Salisbury near Regan's home in Wilton. Regan's phone followed the same route, a few minutes ahead. The meeting was never at Stonehenge. It was a trap. Three Forge Close looked like any other bungalow. Neatly trimmed lawn, white curtains, no sign of horror. But inside that house, detectives believe Anil Chohan was restrained, possibly drugged, definitely forced. The forged documents found later, with his signature, likely came from this room. No one heard screams, no signs of struggle outside. But for Anil, it was the beginning of the end. At some point during the afternoon, Anil was made to sign several papers: ownership transfers, business declarations, departure letters. Experts later confirmed the signatures were genuine, but signed under distress. Afterward, Regan had what he needed: paper proof that Anil had left voluntarily. Now all that remained was to erase the man behind the pen. At 3:42 p.m., Anil's mobile signal disappeared. It never connected again. The implication was clear: he was dead or unconscious. Either way, his voice would not be heard again. Regan's phone, meanwhile, stayed active, moving calmly between Wilton and London. That evening, Regan and Horncy drove to Hounslow. They weren't done. Nancy, Sharonjit, Devender, and baby Ravender were all at home. They likely knew Anil had gone for a meeting, but hadn't heard back. Maybe they were worried. Maybe they were waiting with dinner. At 7:15 p.m., Regan's and Horncy's phones both pinged near the Chohan residence. Detectives believe Regan and Horncy entered the home under false pretenses. Maybe they said Anil sent them. Maybe they said Anil was in trouble. Maybe Nancy opened the door without hesitation. What happened next is speculation, because no one survived to tell it. But based on phone records and items found later, police believe the family was taken, alive, to Devon. It was late, past 10 p.m. 2 adults, a toddler, a newborn, and an elderly woman were transported, possibly in one vehicle, all the way to Belinda Bruin's rural farm. Regan drove. Horncy followed. Reese waited at the site. No traffic cameras caught the full journey, but Regan's phone stayed on, pinging once again near the Devon property. The trench had been dug days before. Belinda thought it was a drainage ditch. Regan had said it would improve the land, but now it had a new purpose. Police believe this was the family's first and last stop. What happened on that cold Devon night will never be fully known, but it ended in silence. Some were buried. Some may have been burned. Some were moved later, possibly by boat. The ditch later yielded charred fabric, jewelry, a baby clothing snap, but no full remains. The forensic report listed possibilities: crushing, burning, ocean disposal. It read like a checklist for erasure. In April, weeks after the murders, canoeists off the coast of Bournemouth found a floating body. Anil, the plastic bag around his head, the tape over his mouth, the weight in his clothes. Someone had tried to sink him and failed. Experts believe his body had originally been buried, then later dug up, loaded into a boat, and dumped into the sea, along with the rest. When police searched Three Forge Close again, they found the carpets replaced. The couch was gone, the room repainted. The garbage had been professionally disposed. It was a cleanup job, but they found one clue left behind. Beneath the newly installed flooring, faint traces of blood under the wood. DNA confirmed it. Anil Chohan had bled here. Regan had built a plan with layers. Lure Anil with a fake deal, forge the handover paperwork, remove the family, create a story. They moved to India, appoint a fake new boss, restart drug imports under a legitimate business. And for weeks it worked, until Onkar made a call. The last known video of the Chohan family was filmed 2 days before the murders. It shows Devender learning to walk, Nancy laughing as Anil films, Sharanjit clapping in the background, Ravender asleep on his mother's shoulder. Their lives were full, their smiles real, their tragedy unimaginable. And yet, it happened. It's a question that haunts every investigator. What if someone had just said no? What if Anil hadn't hired Regan? What if Belinda hadn't accepted the job? What if Horncy had walked away? The tragedy of the Chohan murders wasn't just how brutal they were. It was how avoidable they could have been. Regan didn't arrive out of nowhere. His criminal history was well known. Multiple drug offenses, association with violent traffickers, previous use of freight companies to smuggle heroin, a reputation for betrayal, even in the criminal underworld. His prison sentence had been reduced because he turned informant, but the truth is he was never rehabilitated. He just waited. When Regan left prison, no monitoring system tracked his employment. No conditions prevented him from engaging in freight services again. No one warned CI Afraid about who had just walked in. Because he'd served his time, he was free to start fresh. But Regan wasn't starting over. He was picking up where he left off. In interviews after the trial, several of Anil's employees admitted, he seemed like a good worker, quiet but polite. He was always around, always offering to help, but something always felt off. He never talked about his past. He avoided company gatherings. He had a strange obsession with paperwork. Yet no one spoke up, because sometimes it feels easier to dismiss a chill than to ask why it's there. Belinda Bruin was suspicious when Regan started digging in her field, but she let it go. She was busy, tired, in debt. And when Regan insisted it was just drainage work, she believed him. Later, police asked, "Why didn't you stop him?" She whispered, "I didn't want to cause a scene. I thought he was helping." When the case went to trial, courtroom emotion boiled over. One former CIBA worker stood during testimony and wept. He said, "Anil brought us lunch when we worked late. I can't believe I worked under the man who killed him." Belinda, called to testify, trembled while describing the moment she found Regan and Horncy back near her home after the murders. Onkar, though composed, held his sister's prayer book the entire time. The Chohan tragedy teaches something chilling. Monsters don't always kick down doors. Sometimes they shake your hand, smile politely, offer you a job, dig a ditch while you're not looking. Regan didn't need weapons to start. He needed gaps, people too trusting, systems too slow, laws too forgiving. And he found all of them. Of all the evidence unearthed at Belinda's farm, one piece broke the forensic team. A tiny popper button used on baby grow suits. It was scorched, fused to the soil, but unmistakable. A baby had been there, laughed there, died there. No one spoke when it was passed around in court. The silence was heavier than any testimony. In the weeks before the bodies were found, Regan and his team drove hundreds of miles, moved equipment, dug trenches, visited banks, hauled packages, and not one neighbor, colleague, or passerby thought it strange. That's how disappearances happen, in plain sight, because we've trained ourselves not to interfere. Since the Chohan case, police policies have evolved. Entire family disappearances now trigger immediate Category A protocols. Former convicts working in sensitive industries may undergo higher scrutiny. National databases flag freight company applications tied to past smuggling cases. And the public? They're watching closer now. Because once you've seen how easy it is to erase a family, you never look away again. Even after all this time, after confessions, trials, and discoveries, Devender and Ravender remain missing. No one knows where Regan placed their remains. No final grave, no closure. Their names are etched in memorials, but their bodies remain lost. It's a haunting silence, and one that speaks volumes. The South Asian community around Hounslow changed after the murders. Once open and neighborly, people became cautious, more background checks, more locked gates, less trust in anyone outside the circle. Some said it was fear, others called it wisdom, but no one could argue. Regan's evil had ripple effects far beyond the grave. Belinda Bruin never returned to her old life. She moved, sold the farm, avoided interviews for years. In her final court appearance, she said, "I'll never forgive myself for not questioning him harder, and she shouldn't have to carry the blame." But that's the cost of proximity to a monster. You survive, but you don't walk away clean. In his home in New Zealand, Onkar still plays the same 2-minute video. It's all he has left. Nancy brushing Devender's hair, Anil chuckling behind the camera, Karanjit humming a lullaby, baby Ravender sleeping through it all. Joy, innocence, life, frozen, but never forgotten. At HMP Belmarsh, Regan adapted quickly. He wasn't feared, he wasn't respected, but he was known. Other inmates whispered about him, not because of the drugs, but because of the children. He never showed remorse, no apology, no breakdown. When asked if he regretted what happened, he replied, "What's the point?" Peter Regan Horncy, the accomplice, didn't speak during most of the trial. No testimony, no letters, no expressions of sorrow. The few words he shared with police were chillingly void. "I just wanted a paycheck." Regan said it'd be clean. He got life. But in interviews years later, some officers say they think he still doesn't fully grasp what he helped do. For families, prison is supposed to be justice. But justice doesn't bring back voices. It doesn't fill chairs at the dinner table. It doesn't undo trauma. One officer said, "Putting them behind bars was like stopping a flood," after the house had already washed away. Detective Chief Inspector Trevor Curran led the case. 3 years after the sentencing, he resigned. In a rare public statement, he said, "Some crimes never leave you. I see their faces every night. I kept wondering if we were too late, or if we never had a chance at all." He wasn't the only one. Regan wasn't a monster in appearance. He looked forgettable, ordinary, a middle-aged white man in a collared shirt who blended into crowds. That's the terror of men like him. They don't stand out, they slip through. Charanjit's sister in Punjab wrote a letter every month for a year. She never got a reply. She didn't know the family had vanished. No one called her. No embassy reached out. When she found out what happened, she told reporters, "I wish I had known sooner. I wish I could have prayed for them while they were still alive." The Chohan case exposed massive loopholes in freight company operations, no background checks on major stakeholders, inconsistent tracking of goods movement, lack of international coordination on smuggling alerts. After the case, government officials imposed stricter licensing. Now every freight firm owner must clear criminal vetting. It came too late for CIBA, but not for the next family. In the UK's National Homicide Curriculum, the Chohan case is listed as Case File Number 77, Multi-Victim Disappearance with Cross-Border Forensics. It's used to teach pattern recognition in staged disappearances, forensic importance of digital footprinting, interviewing reluctant or manipulated witnesses, emotional toll management. Young detectives study it. Veteran officers still talk about it. No one forgets it. Everything unraveled because of one thing, a single phone call. Onkar's concern, his decision to follow his gut, to say, "This isn't right." That call pulled on the thread that brought it all down. Never underestimate your instincts. Never stay silent when something feels wrong. Some ask if justice was served. The killers are in prison. The law worked. The system didn't collapse. But others say, justice isn't enough. Justice is what you give the dead. Memory is what you give the living. And this case, above all, demands to be remembered. Regan didn't act out of madness. He wasn't possessed. He wasn't lost. He chose every action, step by step, minute by minute, victim by victim. And in that truth, we find the most terrifying reality. Evil isn't something rare. It's something chosen. Before this ends, remember their names. Anil Chohan, Nancy Chohan, Devender Chohan, Ravender Chohan, Karanjit Kaur. They weren't statistics. They were dreams. Laughter, language, tradition, future. They were life, stolen. In a quiet home in New Zealand, there's a room Onkar Chohan hasn't changed. Devender's toys still sit on the shelf. A faded blanket remains on the cot where Ravinder once slept. "I keep it clean," he said, "but I don't dust the pictures. I want the fingerprints to stay." Not everyone survived what happened, emotionally at least. One of the investigators who worked the field where the bodies were buried took early retirement. He developed PTSD. His wife said he couldn't walk through a wooded area again without shaking. The case changed him, she said. It stayed in his bones. Years later, a journalist tracked down Belinda Bruin for one final interview. She declined to speak on camera but sent a typed letter. "I was trying to start over, and instead I became part of someone's ending. Every time I look at a ditch, I wonder what's under it. It's easy to focus on the dead. But crimes like this ripple outward. Employees who had to clean O'Neill's abandoned office. The midwife who remembered Nancy's laughter. The bank clerk who realized she'd helped process stolen funds. Each became a silent carrier of grief. Onkar didn't rebuild his business. He started a garden. He said it was the only place where things could be buried and still come back beautiful. The lilies are for Nancy, the marigolds for Devender, the small apple tree, planted in memory of Ravender, who never got to taste his first fruit. A small memorial statue now sits in a park in Hounslow. No grand plaque, no headline, just 5 names and a bronze sculpture of a paper plane taking flight. Locals say the kids would have liked it. Quiet, playful, unassuming, just like their family. Every year, a group of high school students studies the Chohan case. Not for gore, not for drama, but to learn what happens when power meets greed and no one watches close enough. Their final assignment? Write a letter to the Chohan family. They don't send it, they read it aloud, to remind the world that remembering is a form of justice too. Kenneth Regan remains incarcerated. He has no visitors, no family, no legacy. When asked in a psychological review what he wanted to be remembered for, he said, "Nothing, just bury me, same way I did them." But he won't be forgotten, not for what he wanted, but for what he took. People often ask, did the family ever get closure? But closure isn't a door you shut. It's a window you learn to live beside. Sometimes it leaks, sometimes it slams open in a storm, and sometimes it lets in a little light. Maybe you watch this story unfold in horror. Maybe you pause to breathe. Or maybe you didn't think something like this could happen so close to home. But here's the truth. Evil doesn't wear horns. It doesn't shout its arrival. It doesn't come cloaked in shadow. It comes as a coworker, a partner, a helper, a man who offers to drive you to the bank and never brings you back. So remember their names. Say them, softly, loudly, just say them. And if you ever feel something's off, don't silence the voice in your gut. That voice might save a life. It didn't save the Chohans, but it gave them justice. And justice, when paired with memory, becomes something stronger than closure. It becomes legacy. The Chohans weren't the only family in the UK to vanish in a single sweep. In 2003, the same year their case broke, another family made headlines, albeit differently. The Soham murders, 2 10-year-old girls, 2 grieving families. One predator hiding in plain sight. There were no ransom notes, no business takeovers. But both cases shared something sinister. The killers were trusted, harmless seeming, capable of blending in with terrifying ease. In the years following the Chohan case, UK forensic psychologists updated their criminal profiling approach. They coined a term, calculated family erasure, defined as the targeted elimination of all key witnesses or inheritors to secure personal or financial gain, carried out with premeditated operational layering. In lay terms, wipe the slate clean, own what's left behind. A deep dive psychological evaluation of Kenneth Regan was released in 2007, classified sections redacted. But some findings were made public. High narcissistic traits, no signs of clinical psychosis, pathological lying as a career strategy, above average intelligence, low emotional empathy. The report concluded Mr. Regan was not insane. He was efficient. There were pieces of evidence the jury never saw. Audio recordings from a wiretap in Regan's cell, notes recovered from Horncy's garage, an alternate witness who recanted out of fear. According to legal experts, these items would have only strengthened the Crown's case, but prosecutors said, "We didn't need a hammer when the truth was already a blade." Journalists who followed the case admitted to making early assumptions. Some tabloids suggested Anil fled with his family to avoid financial ruin. Some headlines read, "Businessman disappears with millions. Is it fraud?" Others hinted at mafia involvement. Few gave the Chohan family the dignity of innocence until their remains were found. After the truth broke, there were retractions, but the damage had been done. The Chohan case changed how the Crown Prosecution Service handles multi-victim disappearances. Families no longer had to wait 7 years for legal death declarations. Missing persons alerts were upgraded when entire households vanished. Asset freezing laws expanded to prevent criminal takeovers of legitimate companies. Anil's legacy became woven into statute. In 2009, Anil's extended family filed a civil lawsuit against one of Regan's business contacts. They claimed he turned a blind eye and enabled the takeover. The case didn't make headlines, but it's settled out of court for a confidential amount. That money now funds a scholarship in the Chohan children's names. In classrooms, the Chohan case is no longer just a file. It's part of ethical training for journalism students, criminology majors, law enforcement recruits. Each group studies a different side. The press learns about responsible reporting. Detectives learn how to follow silence. Lawyers learn how to prosecute ghosts. Even now, there's one question no one can fully answer. Could it have been stopped? If Bruin had warned police earlier? If banks flagged the business change? If someone at CIBA said, "This doesn't feel right," we'll never know. And that's the cruelest part of evil. It often hides in what-ifs. The Chohans were wiped out on paper, but not in memory. Their story lives in laws, lectures, letters, in a garden in New Zealand, in a bronze statue in Hounslow, in whispered prayers on cold anniversaries. They never asked to be remembered this way. But they are, not for how they died, but for how they remind us. Silence is where monsters hide, but memory is where we fight back.